Pam and I was just telling everybody here that we just got back from a trip for a business meeting we had out in Las Vegas this week. Not one of my favorite places. It was in the low hundreds. It was very dry, about 14% humidity. And we walked out of the airport last night and it was like 70, I think it was 73 degrees, but it's like 90% humidity. And it felt like 120. I'm not sure why my thing keeps going. So this week we're going to talk about more delusion. We talk about these things that are convergence of the signs of the times, things that we know that will happen in the end time, and we know that a lot of times the prophetic scriptures speak in terms of a series of events unfolding over a period of time. An example would be the first seal. Now, there's controversy in the prophecy community as to whether the seals happen within the 70th week. Some think that the seals start opening before the 70th week starts. But we know that, for example, the first seal talks about a rider on a white horse that goes forth, conquering and to conquer. So what that means is that when that seal opens, the rider on the white horse goes forth conquering and to conquer, which means that the impact of what he does will unfold over a period of time and eventually reach a peak at some point. And that's sort of how Bible prophecy works. For example, we talk about one of the signs. This is the verse I used last week. And I apologize. We were in meetings all day, every day, and traveling. And so I was putting this, I pray that this is coherent and it is in order. I was going to do it on the plane home last night. I did get a special blessing on the way out. On Southwest, I got the exit row aisle seat. And Pam will tell you which is great for me because I'm kind of tall and I can open my laptop and work in the exit row. The other places, I don't have room, okay? There's for obvious reasons. I think you can do the math and the physics on that. And on the way out, every seat on the plane was full, except the one next to me, which means I can spread out even further. I can get my mouse out. I have 2 desks to work on. And then on the way back, I got the exit row aisle seat again. And every seat on the plane was full, except one, which was the one right next to me. I consider it I'm blessed, okay? You might say nobody wants to sit next to you, so not even your wife. So, it's a matter of interpretation. It's a matter of interpretation. And I won't identify the university, but I sat next to a political science professor from a local university in the Columbus area. And it was a very interesting conversation. And he started asking me questions. We talked about the election and how this is a weird one, nobody knows what's going to happen. And then we started talking about the Middle East and Mackinder's theory of the geographic pivot point of history. He had actually never heard of it. And of course, I'd never heard of it until a few years ago anyway myself. But we started talking about geography and geopolitics and what's going on in Turkey and all this. And I will say this, when I have the aisle seat and you're in the row, you're a captive audience, okay? So you're going to get, unless you get up and figure out how to get past me to the bathroom or something, you're pretty much stuck for 4 hours. So we had a great talk, though. He, a very intelligent guy, and I enjoyed that. Well, I talked about this last week, so this week we're going to do kind of a sort of flesh out some of the things that I talked a little bit about last week, and then give you some new updates. And one of the things we try to do here, it's hard for me to remember. I met a friend, a Facebook friend, came over to the hotel we were at in Las Vegas, and we spent about an hour and a half together just talking. He loves Bible prophecy, and he started listening to the updates a few weeks ago, and I kind of explained to him about how this church got started and some of the things that happened. He goes, "Oh, now I understand why you talk about some of that stuff. I just never got it before." So it's sometimes, people that have been coming here for a long time and listening to me, sometimes I make the assumption that everybody's on the same page, and other people are kind of jumping into the deep end of the pool. But one of the things we try to do here is look at current events sort of through a Christian lens of Bible prophecy and a biblical worldview and how we deal with these things, because there really are things coming upon the world and upon the church that I think need to be dealt with. One of which is this. I mentioned this last week. Model Rule 8.4 of the American Bar Association for the Code of Professional Responsibility that governs lawyers. I mentioned last week that many lawyers, hundreds and hundreds of lawyers wrote, including heads of other American Bar Association sections. When the model rule first came out, they said this is a speech code on lawyers. Amazingly, before it was passed, a lot of those section heads came in and said, we were unanimously opposed to it. Now our group is unanimously in favor of this rule. But my concerns still stand. It is a speech code. I don't care what they say. It will be used as a speech code, and it passed in a pretty much nearly unanimous voice vote at the American Bar Association House of Delegates. Now, less than half of the American lawyers belong to the American Bar Association, and when I was talking to this person on the plane last night, he goes, well, isn't that just, his father was a lawyer out west, and he said, isn't that just a liberal left-wing organization anyway? Now listen, when a university professor says something like that, you know that it's a liberal left-wing organization. And I said, the problem is, and this is the problem, the model rules of the American Bar Association approved are almost universally adopted completely by the local governing, the Supreme Courts that govern the administration of the bar and license to practice law in all the states, without any question, without any alteration. So what the ABA does have an impact. It will also have an impact as these things kind of seep into admission requirements to get into an ABA-approved law school. And in almost every state, in order to sit for the bar exam, there are very minor exceptions that are very difficult to meet. You have to graduate from an ABA, American Bar Association approved law school, or you don't get to take the bar exam. California would be one exception, because I guess they think they don't have enough lawyers in California or something. But this is what's coming, and I'm telling you that I talked to somebody at the meeting we were at. He works for a large local corporation, and he said, it's coming in our corporation. He says, I wore a shirt that had a cross on it and the word Jesus, and they told me if I wore that again, I would be walked out of the building. And that was on a dress down day when you could wear pretty much anything that you want. That was right here in Columbus, Ohio, my friends. So if you think I'm an alarmist, good, because I am. And I'm an alarmist because the facts back up my concern. And with the current administration, the human wrecking ball that is the human geopolitical wrecking ball that is the current administration and its leader is going to do this. They've got, 6 months left, 5 months left? Fasten your seatbelts. I'll show you one of those examples. This is an interesting development. This is really Tower of Babel type stuff. This is The Economist. Now you would think The Economist is what? It's a business magazine. This is about the second or third time in just the last few months that they've had the cover story about how humans are going to alter DNA and that type of thing. This is a cover that just came out the other day of the magazine about how we're going to increase our lifespan. And there's this belief that we're eventually going to unlock the ability for human beings to be immortal. This is really swerving over into the province of God. And I really believe that God will only let it go so far. We know from history, we know from the biblical record, in Genesis chapter 11, he did this at the Tower of Babel. When it gets to a certain point, he will do it again. And the problem is, even the secular people that are pushing this, some are very concerned. What do we do? What are the ethics? And the answer is they don't have an answer for this. And listen, given our anything goes culture where everything is acceptable, how are you going to get a code of ethics that's going to be followed by everybody? It's not going to happen. So this is very frightening stuff, and some of the stuff they're doing are incredible. In fact, National Geographic, that just came out this week also, has the DNA revolution with new gene editing techniques. We can transform life. But should we, is what the cover says in National Geographic. It's out of control. It's out of control, in my view. This mystery of iniquity that I mentioned just briefly in 2 Thessalonians 2, or 2 Thessalonians last week and this week, it will start. Paul said it's already here, it's already at work, but we know that it's going to reach its apex after the Antichrist goes into the temple and is possessed by Satan. So but it's going to, listen, am I wrong when I say that it appears to be on the increase, the mystery of iniquity? I don't think there's any question about it at this point. And as I talked to my friend in Las Vegas and some other people this week, they were like, how much further is God going to let this thing go? And I can tell you, among pastors and Bible prophecy teachers that I've known for a long time, 10 years ago, everybody was sitting around going, oh, can't get any worse than it is now before the Lord returns. Well, that was 10 years ago. Look what's just happened in the last year. This is a book that just came out. It was written by a professor called Pedophilia and Adult Child Sex, a philosophical analysis. One of the reviews of this book, essentially the book says, without taking a position, he sort of says, this is probably acceptable and normal. Okay? Here's a review that says this: Kirchner is injecting nuance and situational ambiguity to chip away at the near universal understanding that sex between adults and kids is always wrong. And this is the way it starts. You know, there's an entry-level drug, and somebody just says, well, I'm not saying it's wrong, you know, maybe it doesn't really seem right, but I can't really say it's wrong. And that's where it starts. And I know people hate slippery slope arguments, but listen, in almost every case in the decline in the morality of our culture, the slippery slope arguments have worked, have proven to be true. He also says this: the reviewer, sex radicals have learned from the successful campaign by gay militants to normalize once taboo behaviors and concepts like same-sex marriage. Now they are in the study phase on pedophilia. Slippery slope, you bet. How bad could it be, though? John, you're just making this up. Here's a website. It comes from, it's called Trans Student Educational Resources, and this is the Gender Unicorn, talking about gender identity, gender expression, sex assigned at birth, female, male, and other. Now listen, I've been told I'm anti-science. I'm not anti-science. I believe in DNA. If your DNA says you're a male, you're a male. If your DNA says you're a female, you're a female. That's these people that are pushing this agenda that are anti-science. Can we get that straight? They are not scientific. They're going against nature itself. That's what Romans chapter 1 says. And remember, it was just a year ago we were talking about the debate over marriage, the definition of marriage. And now here we are just a little over a year later, and we're talking about this is going to be used this fall in the elementary schools of Charlotte, North Carolina. And they are pushing to have this accepted in schools all across the country. They have educational resources, they have things in place, they have lesson plans and everything for teachers to use. Do you think it's going to stop in Charlotte? In this environment? It's not. Here's their website, Trans Student Educational Resources. It says this is a youth-led organization dedicated to transforming the educational environment. You read that? Transforming the educational environment for trans and gender nonconforming students through advocacy and empowerment. In addition to our focus on creating a more trans-friendly education system, our mission is to educate the public and teach trans activists how to be effective organizers. We believe that justice for trans and gender nonconforming youth is contingent on an intersectional framework of activism. You can tell this person went to college, because you have to have this kind of stuff beat into you for like 4 years before you believe it. Ending oppression is a long-term process that can only be achieved through collaborative action. Over at the American Conservative, they have a thing called the cult of transgender. And let me see, I think I have some of this. I didn't have time to put it into a slide. So let me just read to you. I want you to listen to this. The author is Rod Dreher. Rod Dreher. This is just written this week. And he talks about a conversation that he had with somebody in Baltimore this year. Okay, listen to this. This is a real conversation that this person had. She said, I know people accuse you of being alarmist all the time, but let me tell you that they aren't raising teenagers in this culture. The woman told me that at her kids' high school, a shocking number of students are going to their parents and asking to be put on hormones and asking for surgery because they are transgender. This is the cool thing, and the school is falling all over itself to be supportive and to encourage an ally culture. What about the parents? Rod asked. They're going along with it. Why on earth? Because they don't want to lose their kids, because everything in the culture tells them they should, because they think that's how they love their child. And these parents usually become the fiercest LGBT activists. She told me at the high school, kids are now sorting themselves by where they are on the gender spectrum. This is Baltimore today. Sometimes you may not believe this, but I self-censor a lot up here when I'm talking. There's things flying around in here that never make it out of here. I just want you to know that. I know you don't think that that's true, but there's a very heavy filter between here and here. I know it doesn't seem like it, but I'm telling you there is. You have no idea what I'm thinking sometimes. And I'm really toning it down. She told me that the high school kids are now sorting themselves by where they are on the gender spectrum. She added that her brother is a liberal Democrat, an atheist, and a biologist. He tells her that he's extremely worried about this trans thing. The science simply isn't there to justify these radical interventions, but scientists are terrified to speak out because of the general atmosphere and academia around all these issues now. Listen, didn't I just tell you about the ABA Code of Professional Responsibility? What do you think is going to happen? Really? And I can tell you there are a lot of lawyers I've talked to that says, I'm concerned about it. Especially people that do stuff like this, talk in a church. This has nothing to do with the administration of justice, by the way. That makes no difference to these fascists that are in control of setting the rules down. You have to know that. And so it's going to cost to take a stand for your Christian faith. Jesus said it would. So you know what? Deal with it. Pray, stay in the Word, and think about how you're going to respond to this. If this isn't McCarthyism, Rod says, what is? It doesn't become any less McCarthyist because it's done by the cultural left, and he's exactly right. He says this, trying to think where this is. Hang on a second here. It's a great article. You can find it at the American Conservative. God help the poor parents living this nightmare with their children, because the kind of professionals, doctors, and others who ought to be there reining in this insanity appear to have been totally compromised. It cannot be the case that there are so many truly transgender young people in the country. To call something with such severe physiological consequences a fad is too trite, but the transgender thing seems to be a faddish way for teenagers struggling to figure out their sexual identity. And listen, I'm afraid that at this point, it only gets worse. He says this, my belief is that there are and always have been teenagers who question their sexuality, maybe even their identity, or sexual identity, but most of them resolve these questions conventionally. And there's even a 2008 medical study that says the same thing, and I've showed you the guy who worked in the transgender clinic at Johns Hopkins who said to do this with your kids is child abuse. And they've come out and they are being excoriated for taking that stand. I don't even think that these people are Christians, okay, that have taken this stand, because it goes so much against common sense. And it's a form of last days madness, I guess, is the only way I can say this. We talk a lot about this here. Also, we talk about this demographics. This is from The Week that just came out yesterday. America's birth rate is now a national emergency. Listen to just a couple quotes from this little opinion piece. And this is, by the way, have I not been talking about this for a couple of years now? This demographic time bomb that's going on in Western cultures. And there's people from the East with certain religion that have very high birth rates, and they're moving into these places. The new birth rate numbers are out, and they're a disaster. This is just about America. There are now only 59.6 births per 1,000 women, the lowest rate ever recorded in the United States. Most of it is due to people getting married later and choosing to have fewer children. And the worst part is that everybody is treating this news with a shrug. It used to be taken for granted that the best indicator of a nation's health was its citizens' desire and capacity to reproduce. And it should still seem self-evident that people's willingness to have children is not only a sign of confidence in the future, but a sign of cultural health. It's a signal that people are willing to commit to the most enduring responsibility on earth, which is raising a child. The more productive people you have in your society, the healthier your economy. Today we see the problems wrought by the decline in productive populations all over the industrialized world, where polities are ripping each other to shreds over how to pay for various forms of entitlements, especially for old people. The debates play out in different ways in different countries, but in other ways they are exactly the same. That's because they are ruled by the same ruthless mass. The fewer young, productive people you have to pay for entitlements, for old, unproductive people, the steeper the bill for the entire society becomes. The basic problem is strangling Europe's economies. And while the United States is among the least bad of the bunch, it is still headed in the wrong direction. In this last sentence down here, he says this. Well, he says this, look, the United States literally exports more oil than Saudi Arabia and has the world's top expertise in both renewable and traditional forms of energy. It is the world's biggest food producer in a gargantuan country with very little density. There's no reason for the United States to have a weak birth rate, and it is a national emergency that it does, yet no one seems worried, and that might be the biggest worry of all. And that's right. I mean, this is a demographic shift that's never happened in human history before. And really, when you sort of look at that through the lens of Bible prophecy, I don't think it's something that a lot of people didn't see coming, but now it explains a lot about how these various alignments come about in the last days before the Lord returns. And I think we're on the cusp of this. In The Spectator, to follow up on this Pokemon Go thing, very interesting article here. How playing Pokemon Go nearly made me lose my mind. Just listen to a little bit of what this lady says. If millennials have a besetting sin, it's solipsism. The usual youthful sort in this generation, exacerbated by the fashion for selfies and the obsession with their cell phone. Solipsism is essentially being self-centered. And maybe you see it, but I do everywhere. Now imagine a world in which even those kids do look up, it's into their own augmented reality that brought them to them via augmented reality specs. Solipsism, the viewer theory that the self is all that can be known to exist. And here's a little chart that shows this is the universe, and that's solipsism. Me is the center of the universe, so everything revolves around me. Their skies will be full of flapping demons and wizards playing Quidditch. Passers-by, the elderly family will barely register, relegated to a faint and irrelevant real world. Eric Barger was on Jan Markell just yesterday talking about this, and he said he was driving down the street in Seattle, and there was a lady standing in traffic looking at her phone. She was playing Pokemon in the middle of the road. And she didn't even realize the traffic was coming. Steve Bowler, author of a very nasty VR zombie game, The Brookhaven Experiment, had this to say. Virtual reality absolutely changes how we think about violence. It's frighteningly real when you're in there. I jokingly aimed the gun at my own face and pulled the trigger. In the act of doing that, drastically changed my heart rate. Way to go, Steve, she says. It's a problem, and this is something that we need to realize is coming. It's here, and this all plays into the prophetic end time scenario. So let's look at some politics things, because this is just crazy. This is a little chart that was prepared by the Republican House about gaps in the Clinton email record. The subject of her emails and the emails from the Clinton Foundation trying to get jobs or recommending people for jobs within the State Department that had to be approved by Huma Abedin and Cheryl Mills and Hillary Clinton, even though they were also doing work for the Clinton Foundation at the same time and the State Department, led to some questions. I want you to listen. This is a new person at the State Department, not the usual spokespeople that we've seen. Over time, one got promoted to the White House press office. The other, I think they say they're on vacation. They're probably getting reprogrammed so they can continue to suppress their consciousness, their conscience. So they bring in a new one. I want you to watch this lady's face and stuff as she's answering questions, very clear English language questions from the press, and watch this. Well, I think you'll see what I mean.
I want to ask you about one of the emails, and I know you addressed this briefly yesterday. One came from, that the critics have seized on, came from Doug Band of the Clinton Foundation, asking Huma Abedin and Cheryl Mills in an email to, quote, it's saying it's important to take care of, and then the name is redacted, and he's obviously pushing to get this person a job in the State Department, and then Huma replies, basically, they're working on it. Can you tell us why the State Department redacted that name, and whether or not this person wound up getting a job or not?
Okay, well, I can't speak to specific cases. I'm also not going to speak to specific redactions. I will note, though, broadly, the department regularly hires political appointees with a range of skill sets for a broad variety of jobs. It's not unusual for candidates to be recommended to the department through a variety of avenues.
And excuse me one second, I forgot to put in the other video, so give me 1 second here. This is what happens when you do things on a plane. Okay, here we go. Here the thing continued. And you'll recognize this guy. He always asks pretty good questions at these press conferences.
Matt?
Well, I'm just curious, were you answering his question, was this person hired, without getting into who it was?
Yeah, I can't speak to specific cases or specific.
In fact, pretty non-specific, since we don't know what the name is. It's specific.
Well, you're asking about a specific hiring action?
I'm asking if the person if the person referred to in this email, whose name has been redacted, ended up getting a job.
I have no information to speak to specific cases. Again, I am unable to speak to specific cases.
Well, how then can you disabuse us of the notion that there's any impropriety here?
Because the department regularly hires political appointees with a range of skill sets for a broad variety of jobs.
Well, why should we trust why should we believe that statement exonerates the Clinton here of any impropriety? I mean, we don't know who it is. How then can we read that as it's all
I'm
good?
just not going to speak anymore to specifics on this. Do we have more on Clinton emails?
Yes, we do.
Of course we do.
Except in this,
Her question.
and importantly, in this case, Secretary Clinton made a pledge that she would not personally or substantially in any way involve herself with the Clinton Foundation. So it's not just any outside organization, it's a specific organization that she said ahead of time she wouldn't have contact with. So doesn't this then seem to violate that pledge?
So, again, to reiterate, department officials are in touch with a wide range of individuals. I'd note that former Secretary Clinton's ethics agreement did not preclude other State Department officials from having contact with Clinton Foundation staff.
And
Can you at least try to answer Abigail's question, which was, is the department looked into this and determined that there was no impropriety?
The department is regularly in touch with people across the whole spectrum.
That's not the question. The question is whether or not you've looked into this. The building has looked into it and determined that everything was okay, that there was nothing wrong.
We feel confident in our ability and our past practice of reaching out to a variety of sources and being responsive to requests.
I'm sorry. Am I not speaking English? Is this? I mean, is it coming across as a form? I'm not asking you if. No one is saying it's not okay or it's bad for the department to get a broad variety of input from different people. The question is whether or not you've determined that there was nothing improper here.
We feel confident that all the rules were followed.
So you see right there at the end, the conscience actually broke through a little bit. So you won't see her for a while because she's got to go back to camp. And, so eventually you can break down the programming that goes on, but it takes a while. Usually asking a question like, am I not speaking English? Will get you there. So let's look at Europe a little bit. This is interesting because, how this whole thing will kind of unfold in the end times. There's a lot of different theories and everything. And, one of the theories is there'll be this great European superstate, great military power. I probably have a list of 100 characteristics of this final beast empire, very few of which right now Europe will be able to achieve within decades. One of which is this: Europe's armies are dysfunctional. The situation, as much as when Hitler came to power, it looks at some of his articles that were written, including this one a few years ago in Financial Times. Disarm Europe will face the world alone. One day, Europeans may find that the U.S. military is not there to deal with threats lapping at their frontiers. Since 2008, the Financial Times said, this is back in 2013, in response to the economic downturn, most European countries have cut defense spending by 10 to 15%. The longer-term trends are even more striking. Britain's Royal Air Force now has just a quarter of the number of combat aircraft that it had in the 1970s. Do you understand this? And this is not really talked about. So this is, the Royal Navy has 19 destroyers and frigates compared with 69 in 1977. About one-fourth. The British Army is scheduled to shrink to 82,000 soldiers, its smallest size since the Napoleonic Wars. In 1990, Britain had 27 submarines, excluding those that carry ballistic missiles, and France had 17. The two countries now have 7 and 6, respectively. Perhaps it doesn't matter. Question mark? The threat of a land invasion of continental Europe seems to have more or less disappeared. Now, this is 3 years ago with the Soviet Union. The menace that seems to worry Europeans most is the damage austerity could do to the continent's vaunted social model rather than any military threat. Yet you do not have to look very far beyond, this is 3 years ago now, okay? You do not have to look very far beyond Europe's borders to see an array of potential threats massing over the next decade. The Middle East is in turmoil and thousands are dying in Syria, threatening the stability of the whole region. Iran's nuclear program could well lead to confrontation and threaten European energy supplies. Russian military spending is rising, and growing tensions between China and its neighbors could one day menace the freedom of navigation on which European trade depends. The risk that Europeans may suddenly find that they need armed forces after all, only to discover that they are not there anymore. That was 3 years ago. And how has that played out? And have other things changed, like massive immigration of people who don't share any European values, if you can identify any European values worth dying for anymore? Back to the Israel National News article. The NATO Secretary General George Robertson told the truth at the World Economic Forum in Davos in January. The problem in Europe is that there are too many people in uniform and too few of them are able to go into action. And the numbers are just stunning. It's mostly, for example, in the Belgian army, they have as many hairstylists and bakers as they do infantry soldiers, pretty much. Only stating facts. At a meeting in Washington with NATO officials and security experts, Robert Gates said the pacification of Europe had gone too far. An example, while the Ukrainian troops were fighting the pro-Russian separatists on the eastern borders of Europe, a German battalion took part in a NATO exercise in Norway. They had no weapons, but the German army the Bundeswehr, thought well and decided to give the soldiers some broomsticks to be used as a weapon. The Bundeswehr has helicopters that cannot fly and tanks that cannot shoot, and the soldiers will be decreased from 250,000 to 180,000. A year ago, Sir Nigel Essenhigh, former head of the Royal Navy, wrote an article in which he compared England's defense today to that during the rise of Nazism. Which part of the continent will Europe's leaders sacrifice to the Islamic State and jihadists as their grandfathers did with Sudetenland to Hitler? The French Islamicized suburbs, Londonistan? How about this? How about all of it? Here's an article from Der Spiegel. And I bring this up only because I want to give you some comfort when you believe that we're in very troubling times. And these are secular people, not Christian, not Bible prophecy experts who are writing these articles. That's why I share them with you. So you understand that even people in the secular world understand something is afoot, something is going on, and it's different this time. Apocalypse Now is the title, written in late July in Der Spiegel. And I would tell you that I translated it, but I didn't. I found the English language version, but that's the cover of the magazine that it came in. And I would try the German part, but I would spit all over my screen, and you would have even more trouble understanding me than I think people usually do. But Apocalypse Now, a year of crisis, shocks, and fears of terror. And it says this: in light of the many horrific news stories, many are asking, what's the matter with 2016? By the way, praise the Lord for the rain. The brown desert around Las Vegas looked very much like my yard when I got home. So, has the world gone mad, the author says? This question is occupying the minds of many people these days. It feels like the world is out of step, that multiple crises are encroaching upon us, and that the distant world of international politics is about to get dangerously personal. How are we supposed to deal with the feeling of living in an era that we no longer seem to understand? Listen, the church that studies Bible prophecy, that talks about these subjects, and this is increasing, what we do here is increasingly more and more rare. So as the signs increase, the teaching goes down. Or the teaching goes down so much that people have their head buried in the sand. But we know. But it is rather likely that the global insecurity will become the new status quo. The old, more stable world of the 1990s is not coming back. We have to accept the fact that we live in trying times. This is a German secular magazine. We are living in an age of shocks and crises that could well be traumatizing in their rapid succession and concentration. Maybe this guy is one of the people in Germany that watch our stuff. Since it's not yet clear whether they're only a temporary jolt or the beginning of a trend with no end in sight. But there is much indication that we find ourselves in a new era of global insecurity. The biggest geopolitical stories of our times are the destabilization of the Middle East, the European Security Order, and the European Union. In addition, there has been a societal shift in many Western countries. Many citizens are angry at the elites because they see themselves as victims of globalization, free trade, and migration. The classical political camps are dissolving, and the battle between the political left and right is replaced by one between isolationists and internationalists. Finding the thread that ties all of this together is tough. We know, right? God laid it out perfectly in our scripture. There are casual random effects, clear connections, and we're often dependent on speculation. Does the ease with which attackers commit murder in the West have anything to do with the horrific images of Syria that we're seeing? Instability begets instability. That's something we are now seeing on a daily basis. And I'm the alarmist. Old state structures in Syria, Libya, and Iraq have collapsed. Borders once imposed by colonial rulers have disintegrated. Some political scientists feel reminded of the 30 Years' War given the unrest throughout the region. By now, the destabilization of the Middle East has also enveloped Turkey, where old state structures are being called into question. The country is on the brink of civil war as political Islam faces off with secular tradition. This was written a few weeks ago. Erdogan's won that, tearing the country apart. The further Turkey distances itself from Europe, the more the unrest in the region will have an impact on Europe, for the continent will have lost an important buffer between East and West. Another worrisome tendency in the West is the tendency to believe the kinds of conspiracy theories that circulated on Facebook and Twitter in some countries after the Arab Spring and poisoned the atmosphere there. Even in Europe, some citizens have completely lost their certainty that a reality-based and proven facts even exist. The credibility of classic media and politicians is called into doubt. Instead, lies and rumors are preferred. Many of us simply don't understand the world anymore. It will probably be up to the historians of future generations, assuming there are future generations, to accurately categorize what exactly is that we're experiencing in these times of transition. This, however, is not the time to give in to panic. It's time to have confidence in one's own values and keep fighting for the society one's believe in. But that presumes that the society has values. And when anything goes, there are no values that anybody wants to defend. Geopolitical turmoil is best overcome when one is grounded in clear convictions, which holds true for both citizens and countries as a whole. First of all, a clear compass is needed in order to take responsibility for foreign policy, confront dictators, and manage the crises that we're witnessing. And they mentioned Turkey in there, and this thing continues to unfold in Turkey. I did say a couple weeks ago that I thought Turkey would, Turkey's days in NATO were numbered. Of course, the NATO spokesperson came out and said, Turkey is a valued ally making substantial contributions to NATO's joint efforts. Okay, that guy lives in Europe, okay? We can call it, he lives in fantasy land, and he doesn't understand the reality of the situation. Turkey and NATO, in my view, are over. Turkey has moved, as I suspected a couple weeks ago, closer to a couple of countries. In fact, the big meeting this week took place. Turkey, Russia determined to boost relations, Erdogan says. Putin, Erdogan moving towards restoring Russian-Turkey ties. Turkey let down by the West, looks for alternative superpower support. Turkey-Russia rapprochement, not against Europe, Germany says. So Germany is, again, they're living in fantasy land because this has happened in just the last couple of weeks, this alliance between Turkey and Russia. Turkey signals a joint defense plan with Russia, said its foreign minister. So here we see Turkey and Russia, an alliance that many see in Ezekiel chapter 38 unfolding right in front of your eyes. It hasn't happened like ever, but it is now. And a month ago, we could have talked about it. Oh, you're just a conspiracy theorist. You're just speculating. Stop with the nonsense. Not going to happen. Okay, who's right now? That's the question. And then this is a picture of, recognize the foreign minister of Iran there on the left. There's no sound for this. On the left, meeting with the Turkish foreign minister. It looks like they're not on very friendly terms. Shiite and Sunni, they never get along. They never like to sit down and talk. And so here's this alliance that some see in the end times. I kind of tend to agree with it. And there it is. Russia, Turkey, Persia, Iran, all put in place. Russia's doing some military exercises down in Crimea. I don't know what that means. A lot of people think that they've increased their troops along the Ukraine-Russia border as well, moved some missiles and defense systems and tanks in place. I don't know if there's going to be an outbreak of hostilities there. New York Times Magazine today has a great long article, about 60-page long, the entire issue of their New York Times Magazine. You can find it online, Fractured Lands. It goes through the history of of what's going on in the Middle East. And it talks about the origins, start back in 72, Part 2, the Iraq War, Part 3, the Arab Spring, Part 4, ISIS rising, Part 5, Exodus. It's interesting that the Parts 3, 4, and 5 have all happened in the last 5 years. The others took decades to put in place. And this is what we say will happen with Bible prophecy. Things will go along, and then they'll accelerate. And we see it happening. So just understand, this is the world that I think the Bible has prophesied would happen. And God gave us this information so we would not be disconcerted by it. It's disconcerting, I admit. I mean, look, I read the news. Believe me, I read the news. And there's some days I don't want to read the news. But this is the world that we want to be aware of. The French foreign minister, averting France's war of all against all. This is the French security minister. The confrontation is inevitable, he said. There are an estimated 15,000 Salafists those are very radicalized Muslims, among France's 7 million Muslims, whose radical fundamentalist creed dominates many of the predominantly Muslim housing projects at the edges of cities such as Paris, Nice, or Lyon. Listen, if it's only 15,000 and they're dominating the suburbs around Paris, in Lyon and Nice, it's more than 15,000. Okay, this is being in the French government means, who has their head buried in the sand the deepest. Their preachers call for a civil war with all Muslims tasked to wipe out the miscreants down the street. In Gatestone Institute, they talk about this, and this article came out this week. I highly recommend that you look at gatestoneinstitute.org. It's a great resource website. This article is titled Islam's Kind. It's dark in here today, so I can't see the clock, so I guess I'll just... there's one here. Well, I'll ignore it too. So, I'm doing okay. We won't be here too long. Islam's quiet conquest of Europe. Listen to some of this. It talks about cites some articles. The Salafists openly challenges France's way of life and do not make a secret of their willingness to overthrow the existing order in Europe through violent means, terror attacks, and physical intimidation. But paradoxically, if the Islamist threat to Europe were confined to the Salafists, it would be easier to defeat it. This article the Gatestone Institute has some of the best analysis that I read anywhere. Sometimes, by the way, it's hard to share their articles on Facebook for some reason. I don't know why, but there is in fact another threat even more dangerous because it is more difficult to decipher. It has been dubbed by the magazine Valeurs Actuelles the Quiet Conquest. It is moderate Islam's sinuous project of producing submission. Its ambition is clear, changing for society slowly but surely. And here's the cover of the article. And what is the article talking about? Sharia. This is the goal. Jihad by physical terror, jihad by physical conquest, jihad by what? Immigration. Those are all tactics and the ultimate goal, which is Sharia. And here is a French magazine recognizing that this is the goal. And so the question is, what is Europe going to do about it? Well, if it's up to Angela Merkel, bring in more. Why? I live in a very secure compound. Nobody's going to get me. Sorry about you people out there. And it talks about an organization in France called the Union of the Islamic Organizations of France. This is very similar to the organizations that you see in the United States, like CAIR, C-A-I-R, Council on American Islamic Relations. Like CAIR, the Union of the Islamic Organizations of France is a subset, a cover for what group? The Muslim Brotherhood. Here's an article from the Simon Wiesenthal Center in Europe, The True Face of the UOIF, and it talks about this. UIF's vocation is mainly political. In conformity with the doctrine of the Muslim Brotherhood and Sheikh Qawadari, with whom it maintains multiple ties, the UOIF aims mainly at consolidating its control over the Muslim communities in France to transform them into a political power and its voice in the European institutions. This is exactly what these networks are doing through Mosque in the United States. Phil Haney has talked about this. Phil Haney knows what he's talked about. Phil Haney has made the connections. So, September 1st, you can find it at Eventbrite. Phil Haney will be speaking down in Norwood, in Cincinnati. Doors open at 6. Talk starts at 7. You want to hear Phil? Go down. He'll be signing his book, See Something, Say Nothing. And I don't know who organized that down there, but I'm thankful that they're bringing Phil to Cincinnati. I intend, if I can fit it in my schedule, to go down. They asked for a $5 donation to the door to cover Phil's travel expenses, so nobody's making money off of this. So But this is what Phil discovered was going on in America. And the Simon Wiesenthal Center says it's going on in Europe. Notwithstanding its official discourse, the UIF also encourages radical views on Israel and the Jews, and its own websites abounds in anti-Jewish hate messages, calls to jihad, and the advocacy of terrorism. And listen, these are the organizations that churches in this country are going out and doing joint meetings with. Here's the thing. They're dupes. They're dupes. What they should do is go share the gospel with them and stop venturing together and having these joint meetings and that type of thing. That's what they need to do. Stop it. Just remember that old Bob Newhart comedy clip? Stop it! Just stop it. Look it up online. It's a hilarious clip. In Italy, we have just witnessed the strategy of this moderate Islam. The largest and most influential Islamic organization sponsored Milan's first Muslim councilwoman, Sumaya Abdul Qadir, a veiled candidate of the center-left coalition. I want you to know that there is an alliance between the left and political Islam in many respects, because they share a lot of the same fascist tendencies. Qadir's husband, Abdallah, whatever that name is, openly called for the destruction of the state of Israel. It is a historical mistake, a scam, he wrote on Facebook. His solution, Control-Alt-Delete. In other words, reboot and get rid of Israel. Sounds like he got that from the Iranian government. Take 2 stars of this French moderate Islam. The first one is Tariq Ramadan, the grandson of Hassan al-Banna, the founder of the Muslim Brotherhood, the motto of which is Allah is our objective, the Prophet is our leader, the Quran is our law, jihad is our way, dying in the way of Allah is our highest hope. So this is him. He applied for French citizenship, lives in the Parisian suburb of Saint Denis. He's written 30 books. He has 2 million Facebook followers. He's in academic chairs in universities all over the world. And he's the director of the Research Center for Islamic Law in Doha, Qatar. And his vision for France? Bring it here. He said this is his vision. Islam is a French religion and the French language is a language of Islam. Ramadan's project is not to hope for Europeanization of Islam, but the not hope for frightful Islamization of Europe. He opposes the assimilation of Muslims into French culture and society. And if you talk to people in France, they'll say that's exactly what happened. So listen, there's not 15,000 of these people. There are hundreds of thousands of these people that think this way. And it's tearing Europe apart. A few days before the election in Milan, Ramadan was in Italy to endorse the candidacy of this lady. Today in Europe, several scenarios are possible, including the worst. Among them, there is a civil war, which many are beginning to talk about, including Patrick Calvar, the director of domestic intelligence in France. This is what the Islamic State is looking for, unleashing a blind repression so that the Muslim population will show solidarity with the revolutionary minority. Yet there is still worst possible outcome, that nothing happens and we continue as is. Another article talks about this. I don't have time to go into it, but it talks about Rotherham in England and what's been going in nice, kind old England. Listen to the opening paragraph of this. Over the past 16 years, more than 1,400 young girls between the ages of 12 and 16 living in Rotherham, England, have been groomed for sexual exploitation on an industrial scale. An independent inquiry into who was running these child sex rings found that an overwhelming majority of the perpetrators were Pakistani men, and that because of this, authorities feared accusations of racism if they pursued prosecution. Go back to my first slide. ABA model rules shut down speech, make people afraid to speak the truth to these things. Then you don't even have to fire a shot to take over. That's what the Soviet Union said they would do to America. We'll take you guys over without firing a shot. Their fears aren't entirely without foundation. The British Muslim Youth Organization has openly encouraged British Muslims to cut ties with authorities over what they perceive as an unprecedented level of Islamophobia. Boo-hoo. This is a clear instance of what has gone wrong with modern liberalism in the West. Cultural relativism has taken priority over the rights of women, and only when white Western men strike is there a brave call to action. Western feminism and it seems social justice warriors in general are more concerned about mansplaining and manspreading than they are about the ever-increasing threat of Islamism and the glaringly obvious problem that rises when countries emphasize multiculturalism but don't equally emphasize assimilation. All of this, I think, has tremendous, this is an article in the Federalist this week. Go look it up and read it. It's a great article. So do you mind if I take about 5 more minutes? I heard no oppositions. So it's because I beat you into submission. So let's just look at at Israel real briefly. And I have a lot more, but we'll go quickly. This is something that came, so listen, in the light of what's going on with the Islamic State, the Islamization of Europe, and the invasion that's really taken place there, and what's going on in the ripping apart the seams of that society and culture and political system, what's going on in the United States? We're so much smarter, right? Here's a report that came out. This is from the New York Times. Military officials distorted intelligence on ISIS, the report says. And this report issued by the U.S. House of Representatives Joint Task Force on the U.S. Central Command Intelligence Analysis, it said this: intelligence of products approved by senior CENTCOM, Central Command, leaders typically provided a more positive depiction of U.S. anti-terrorism efforts than was warranted by facts on the ground, and were consistently more positive than analysis produced by other elements of the intelligence community. Throughout the first half of 2015, many Central Command press releases, statements, and congressional testimonies were significantly more powerful than actual events. For example, a CENTCOM official stated publicly that a major military assault to take back Mosul could begin as early as April or May 2015. And it hasn't. Here's a General Tata on Fox News talking a little bit about this.
Governor, unfortunately, it's very credible, and it's just the tip of the iceberg. I have very well-placed sources inside this thing that tell me that someone from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, who frequently meets with the President, directed a senior official in Central Command to quit producing products of record, as they're called, that showed negative intelligence that did not fit the narrative of the Obama administration. And so what you have here is a directive from the administration to cook the books. It's not within Central Command alone, and so you get this clashing that has led to this climate that the report, and I've read the entire report, it talks about this toxic climate, and you have majors and lieutenant colonels and sergeants who just want to do the right thing for their country and aren't worried about their report cards. That clashes now with the directed narrative, and they're told not to produce anything that doesn't fit the junior varsity narrative.
Okay, listen. I want you to step back for a minute. And Erdogan in Turkey. I've been reading about this guy for over a decade. What Erdogan did in Turkey was out of the Muslim Brotherhood playbook. And what he did was he started purging secular-oriented people from the military leadership. He has then gone and essentially made the press kowtow to him. He's closed down newspapers. He had a group of the Gulen Islamists and ones loyal to him. The last coup, staged or not, gave him an opportunity to go through his very long enemies list and get rid of people that would oppose his agenda in the military, in the press, and in the universities and education system. He has used his power to suppress opposition to himself. Now, you can take whatever you want out of what I'm saying, but I am telling you that our president and his administration has done the exact same thing. They have purged the military of a lot of Christian leadership that would stand in opposition to this, that would stand up and speak the truth. And this is what you get. So draw your own conclusions where all that is coming from, okay? But I'm telling you, it fits the pattern of Erdogan perfectly. Now, it's still in process in our country, but go on. Here is Sebastian Gorka talking just a little bit. Listen to him. I need to play this clip.
Does he not endanger people on the battlefield by making up stuff about what our enemy's really like?
Well, I know the Commander-in-Chief likes to golf, but this act of willfully distorting and playing down the intelligence assessments when America is at war is tantamount to being a treasonous act. If during World War II somebody had been ordering our intelligence community to water down the assessments of what the Japanese were doing or what Hitler was doing, if that person were found out, they could have been court-martialed and they could have been executed. This is political interference in the intelligence cycle. It is absolutely outrageous and it will endanger American lives. It is clear the administration will brook no information that undermines the narrative that their policies are winning, when at the same time ISIS has become the Godzilla of international jihad. 80,000 jihadis, territory with 6 million people on their new caliphate, and with attacks are happening outside the war zone every 84 hours. That's the truth, that's the reality, but it doesn't match the White House narrative, therefore it must be sunken, it must be censored.
Dr. Gorka, I've only got about 30 seconds, but I've got to ask this question. If I were a Democrat trying to defend this, I might say, look, it's always been the role of the commander-in-chief to put the best foot forward, to try to give the American people confidence. So why is that not an acceptable explanation for what happened? And we've only got a few seconds.
Yeah, there's always rallying the troops and convincing the nation that this is important and that we can win. But that has nothing to do with the censorship of intelligence. Those are two completely different things, and the latter can cost people lives.
That is frightening.
Well, look, this is the reality of the world we live in, okay? And we still have some freedom here. We need to do some things. I want to finish, just give me a few more minutes. I wonder, I was working on this on the plane. I'm wondering, like, what did people looking over my shoulder at my computer screen, what are they thinking? And look, I'm to the point where I don't care because this is serious stuff and we're in dire situation and we need to talk about this. We need to be open. And listen, there's a lot of, the Islamist State is not bad. It's a JV team, all that stuff that the Obama administration and the candidate of one of the major parties says. It's nonsense, folks. This is the new magazine, Dabiq. Now, Dabiq is a city in Syria where the Islamists believe that the final battle between Islam and Christianity will take place. It's under the control, it's in that area where the Islamic State has control. It's very important to them, and they have a magazine named that. And the current issue is this: Break the Cross. ISIS leaders make clear they want to bring about the end of days. I think Joel Rosenberg wrote this. That is to slaughter Christians in the Middle East and the West and around the world and to annihilate Christianity from the earth. ISIS leaders lay out 6 reasons for this. In their article, in this magazine, just came out. You can get it online. It's very slick, well published, looks, content is horrifying, but it's a slick publication. You say, look, this is what the West gives you. What do they do? What do they do? What do they show? The White House lit up in the rainbow colors. They go to the this Khan, Captain Khan, who died in Iraq, whose father spoke at the Democratic National Convention. And look at what the caption says down here. Beware of dying as an apostate. They go here, the article, Why We Hate You and Why We Fight You. And in this article is a picture of, this is from a rally in Washington, says, my two moms are married. They say, this is what the world gets you. And you can go to Joel Rosenberg's blog, and they say, we hate you first and foremost because you're disbelievers, you reject the oneness of Allah. Whether you realize it or not, by making partners for him in worship, you blaspheme him, claiming that he has a son. You fabricate lies against his prophets and messengers, and you indulge in all these devilish practices too. We hate you because of your secular liberal societies, permitting things that Allah has permitted. Number 3, in the case of the atheist fringe, we hate you and wage war against you because you disbelieve the existence of your Lord and Creator. Number 4, we hate you for your crimes against Islam and wage war against you to punish you for your transgressions against our religion. 5, we hate you for the crimes against the Muslims. And 6, we hate you for invading our lands and fight you to repel and drive you out. And so they have this article. And then this was also released this week. ISIS kill list targets 15,000 unsuspecting American Christians. They have not, in the U.S., here's just a little, all right, let me read you this quote. John Cohen, a former counterterrorism coordinator at the Department of Homeland Security and presently a professor at Rutgers University, said the task of informing thousands of people that they were on ISIS radar was simply too much for the resources available to the agency. Now listen, people have to take individual responsibility for this. I really don't live my life in fear. I want you to know that, okay? But I think about these things and what I do. Now look, I know I have this great hope. Whatever happens to me, even up to death, I know that I'm with the Lord ultimately. So that ought to be, that's our blessed hope, to be with the Lord. And we need to live like this. But listen, if 15,000 people on a list can't be notified, how are they going to deal with 15,000 Salafists in France? The tax. Do you understand what I'm saying? See something, say something. That's what you should do. You see something suspicious, report it. At least do your duty as a good citizen. And let's keep each other in prayer. And I've got way more, but we don't have time. So we'll talk about that next week. Some things going on with regard to the Palestinian elections this week are coming up soon. It looks like Hamas may take control of the area of the West Bank. And they have, well, that's what we suspect. Essentially what they're doing is they're going out and they are telling people either vote for us or burn in hell. So so these areas, the blue area is Area C that the Palestinians have control over. It's relatively unpopulated, and this is where all the fighting is about, is how we're going to divide this up. At least, you know, the West thinks that if we do that, everything will be just fine and hunky-dory, and there's a whole bunch of reasons for that. And Caroline Glick had a great article Friday on the Jerusalem Post. You can go online and read that. So let's pray and let's leave, and we'll come back and we'll talk more about some of these issues next week. Lord, I would just pray a special prayer for us, for the times that we live in, that you will steel our minds and our hearts, make us secure in our faith, make us bold, willing to speak the truth, and keep in mind our ultimate hope of our eternity with you. Give us courage, strength, wisdom, and the power of your Holy Spirit as we go this week. In Jesus' name, amen.